Yeah, so welcome. Thank you for being with us. First, I do want to acknowledge the University of Arizona sits on the original homelands of indigenous peoples who have stewarded this land since time immemorial. Aligning with the university's core value of a diverse and inclusive community, it is an institutional responsibility to recognize and acknowledge the people, culture, and history that make up the Wildcat community. At the institutional level, it is important to be proactive in broadening awareness throughout campus to ensure our students feel represented and valued. And let me introduce myself. My name is Chelsea Farrar. I'm the Curator of Community Engagement here at the University of Arizona Museum of Art. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to our first live Thursday Art Talk for fall 2020. Really happy to see a lot of returning members, supporters, as well as even new visitors to the museum. Of course, for safety precautions in response to COVID-19, our galleries are still closed, but we planned an incredible fall season of online talks, virtual exhibitions, and other online programs. So while our physical doors are closed, our staff is currently working and has been working all season long over summer and even last spring to make sure our collection is safe and looking its best, allowing us to continue to inspire and incite critical dialogue. And so two of those key staff members are joining us tonight for this talk, Virtual Home Care 101. And those two incredible people are Albert Chamillard. Albert has has 20 years experience in preparation, handling, and proper installation of art. He graduated from the U of A in 2003 with a BFA in studio art. In addition to his occupation as an exhibition specialist at the University of Arizona Museum of Art, Albert is also an exhibiting artist who shows his work nationally with representation in several galleries. And our second staff member joining us tonight is Kristen Schmidt. Kristen has a BA in art history from Indiana University, and her MA is from here at the U of A in art history with a master's thesis that was on a suite of early modern prints in the museum's collection, in fact. She's been working as a museum professional for 23 years, 13 years. We've been very lucky to have her here as a registrar at the Tucson, at U of A Museum of Art, but prior to us, she was at the Tucson Museum of Art. She says her primary goal as a registrar, after she retires, she hopes her successor will never have to ask, why in the world did she do it that way? So one thing before I hand it over to Kristen, who's going to get us started today, is that we do ask that you remain muted during our presentation or talk, but please definitely use the chat function at the bottom of your Zoom window to leave any comments or questions for Albert and Kristen as they're presenting. And then we're streaming live on Facebook as well. So those of you that are watching on Facebook can post any questions in the comments, and we have some staff who will add those questions or comments to the Zoom chat here. And then Kristen and Albert have saved time at the end to hopefully answer all of your burning questions about caring for art in your home. And we do hope that it's an interactive discussion. So with that, I am so excited to hand it over to Kristen.
Everybody, welcome. As Chelsea said, I'm the registrar at the museum. So my job is primarily the care and handling and management of the art collection, including documentation. So Albert is actually the lead in exhibition installation and framing and about 10,000 other things. But we work very closely together to find art handling solutions together. And I help out with installations. So that's why you see both of us here tonight. So I'm going to go over some pretty general concepts in care and handling. And then Albert is going to add some and also speak a little bit more toward specific equipment and tools. We're not going to be able to cover every single situation and every kind of artwork because art is unique. And in any case, I should also note that we are going to be treading somewhat dangerously on other people's fields of expertise, such as conservation, framing, packing, and shipping. But we're actually not allowed to recommend any specific vendor for any of these goods and services. So I hope we'll save on those questions. What we do hope is to arm you with enough information to be dangerous, to be able to find out those resources, and we'll also give you resources at the end as well. So like I said, we're not conservators, but our best bet and your best bet, oh, there's us working as a team. Our best bet is to practice preventive conservation. So that's basically just preventing damage to artwork before it happens. And as you can see, it's cost effective. It includes a lot of different factors. So I'm just going to go over a few tips tonight. And another reminder is that these tips will be based on best practices in the museum industry. So you'll of course want to adapt them for your own use at home. So preventive conservation tip number 1, touching art. Wear gloves. At the museum, we wear gloves whenever we're handling artwork. We want to avoid transferring any dust and dirt and grime and the natural oils that are on our own hands onto artwork or onto frames. It's especially important when considering metal objects. So some of you may be familiar with this piece. This is a beautiful Jean Arp's sculpture. It's bronze and it has this very brassy, like tempting finish to it. So a lot of ungloved touch has happened on this poor sculpture, probably both by staff and visitors. So what's happened is some fingerprints, when they aren't wiped right away, will end up etching, the oil will end up etching that fingerprint permanently into the finish. And then in order to fix that, you would have to actually destroy the finish. So don't let that happen. To prevent it, anytime you find an object has been touched without gloves or with dirty gloves, you'll want to take a cloth to it right away, like a microfiber cloth, or even like old, like those cloth diapers that people would use. Those are very soft and appropriate as well. And the kind of gloves that we use, as you can see, we have nitrile gloves, and if everyone in the world weren't familiar with nitrile gloves before 2020, we all should be now. There's a great bet, we've been using them for a long time in the museum industry. You get a really good grip, but of course the downside, like everything else, is that they are disposable, so they end up creating some waste. Cotton gloves, fantastic. They're washable, they're reusable, but they also don't provide as good a grip as nitrile gloves, and the cloth can sometimes snag on a fragile item. And I know Albert has an opinion on what kind he likes to use.
I sure do. I prefer black nitrile gloves because I do like that strong grip they give you to handle work with. Although I do prefer cotton gloves because they allow for more breathing of your hand. And the one real big downside to nitrile gloves is that your hands will sweat in them. And so to a large degree that you actually have to check occasionally and make sure that you're not dripping out of them when you're handling art or handling work or anything like that. So they both have pros and cons, but for everyday use, I definitely prefer the nitrile gloves.
All right, so on to tip number 2, placing art. So you really want to avoid direct sunlight, and especially for works with light sensitive colors, works on paper. There's UV film that you can put on your windows, and there's lighting that you can, artificial lighting that you can use. I think Albert will talk a little bit more about ways to prevent light damage in a little bit. And the other thing is that you want to avoid huge fluctuations in temperature and humidity. I like to joke around that if I see real artwork in your bathroom, that we're no longer friends. But you actually can put real artwork in your bathroom. You just have to be careful and understand what's going to happen to that artwork when you put it in there. The climate in a bathroom obviously can have great fluctuations. It can be pretty brutal to different pieces, like it can warp paper. Different mixed media can flex at different rates and then fall apart. Mold and mildew can be a problem. So kind of a very broad rule is to only put art in the bathroom that A, you don't care about, or B, that you might otherwise be putting outdoors. And I just wanted to show you an example of some light damage. This poor girl is in our collection, And you can see 3 different shades of paper there, and those represent different mat sizes that have been around her. And so that you can see the kind of damage that blight has created on that paper. So what does all of that mean for our snowbird population that might leave town in the summertime? So you either need to keep your AC going all summer if you want to keep preserving your artwork, or try to find some climate control storage if you can. And Albert, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd add a couple of things. Obviously, we live in a place with a very strong sun, so it is critical to keep your artwork out of direct sunlight at all times possible. And Kristen's correct, if you are leaving your art collection here for any time for months over the summer, to leave your air conditioning going. I do want to add previously that I do actually have original art in my bathroom. And it's a case-by-case period, but Kristen is absolutely correct. While I'm not experiencing any damaging on the work that I have, it's something I definitely keep a close eye on and would remove if I saw anything happening.
Great. So tip number 3, handling art. So again, we're talking about your personal collection. You handle it however you want to. It's, you know, we're not going to come in and arrest you for handling your art wrong. But the objects in our museum, we're meant to take care of them in perpetuity. So they will be handled thousands of times before it's all said and done, as long as we're lucky and we are also doing our job well. So we need to be extra careful. So when handling, look for handles. As on the left, you see a picture of the Addison Gallery moving their Carrie James Marshall painting that is a mixed media on canvas. There's no frame to it or anything. So they built a nice way of handling their piece, a big, huge, like 2x4 to handle it, and it keeps it nice and flat. Another example is when we got our Morris Louis painting. I'm sorry, I'm not showing you the painting itself, but the back of the painting, when we got it conserved and restretched, the conservators added a beautiful handle on the back to help us handle the work safely. So use handles and don't use handles. They can potentially be the most vulnerable part of an object. So you'll really want to use both hands and take the bulk of the weight in both of your hands, and try not to grab by the handle. And similarly, here are 2 ways you can grab a frame. On the left, you see grabbing from the top with one hand, and on the right, grabbing with both sides with both hands. Like a frame can withstand a certain amount of weight and handling in the left method, but it really, over time, you know, it only takes one time of picking it up that way, and the corners of the frame could potentially fail, and, you know, glass, matte artwork goes crashing to the ground.
Yeah, I'd like to add here too that even if a frame can survive being being picked up by the top rail, it can warp it over time and give it kind of a bowed look. It's always good to grab both hands on the side. If you can't, if for some reason you're carrying something else and only have one hand, you can always carry it by the wire on the back, generally with the artwork facing out away from you.
Yeah, and part of our job is to think of like the worst thing that could happen to an artwork and try to head that off before it happens. Again, preventive conservation. So one more handling tip. Hopefully this comes through well on your screen. If you have a large canvas that is stretched on stretcher bars, on the left you see me carefully wrapping my entire hands around the stretcher bar such that my knuckles are coming very close to the back of the canvas. You really want to avoid touching the canvas at all. On the right you see just pinching the stretcher bars between your thumb and fingers to get a good grip. Okay, so tip number 4, storing art. So this is a Solander box. It's just a kind of archival document box that's ideal for storing small works on paper, matted, unframed pieces, small objects. It's just a really great way to sort and inventory your objects, because you can see there's a little label holder on the front of the box. It keeps the dust out, it keeps the light out. If you need to handle a lot at once, put them in the box and handle them that way. And my personal bugaboo is seeing the ways that people like to stack their artwork. Now, if you're prepping a bunch of art to install, or if you're storing some for some amount of time, on the left you see like how someone might consolidate a pile in such a way to make it smaller. They would nest an object sort of inside another object, and that is a complete no-no. It might feel good at first, but what you're doing is actually putting a lot of pressure on that glass and on the artwork itself, when on the right we see things stacked such that the frames are taking all of the weight, and the frames are there to protect the artwork, so that's their job, and you should let them do that. Anything to add, Albert?
No, I was going to add something about handling art. One of the practices that Kristen and I do at the museum is when we have to move any object, we generally will walk the route we're going to bring it through, to make sure there's no obstacles, there isn't anything unusual. I think that's also a good practice for at home. If you are bringing a piece of artwork home from an artist or from a frame shop, it's good to walk, where if you're going to bring it to your living room, walk from your car to the living room and make sure your cat's not sleeping, there isn't a package that's been delivered, or somebody's not there, because it's surprising how many times you will be carrying something and you will hit some sort of obstacle. So it's always helpful. If you can get it up on your wall, it's fine, it won't be damaged, and you can look at it forever. But if you bang it into something on the way, you'll always notice it. So always a good idea to just do a practice run.
Good tip. And also, if you are working with another person as a team to install artwork, communication is key. So, you know, I will go backwards, or I'm gonna, you need to pivot around to the right. Communication is key. Okay, so we have one more tip, and that is packing and shipping art. These are the inquiries that I get the most at the museum. How to pack and ship artwork. There are so many factors to consider, and we really don't have a whole lot of time, so I'll have to just keep it nice and brief. And you can let us know if that might be a session that you're interested in hearing more about in the future. So the pro tip for if you do not want to spend a lot on shipping, you better spend a lot on packing. You're absolutely free to send objects through the mail, through FedEx, through UPS. But if you do that, you'll want to pack and overpack to the extreme to ensure they'll get to their destination intact. They oftentimes will go down a conveyor belt like you see on the left. They'll be handled by multiple people. They'll be on the tarmac at an airport, all kinds of conditions. And they'll be moving around at high speeds as well. So you'll want to double box things. You'll want to make a custom crate maybe, like on the right there. Make sure there's lots of padding with foam and bubble and plastic. As my former boss at the TMA told me, overkill is just about good enough. So if you don't want to spend a lot on packing and crating, the pro tip is, you guessed it, spend a lot on shipping. There are specialty art shippers out there. They understand and are very sensitive about how to handle artwork, how to stack them inside a truck, how to install, how to pack, how to make crates. And they'll be extremely careful. I mean, in this photo, we're seeing what looks like an unframed canvas wrapped in plastic only, and it's about to be put into a truck. This is a possible scenario that I have used. These kinds of companies, they'll usually have two drivers, at least two driver/art handlers, so they'll never have to leave the truck alone. climate control, air ride, and for all of that, you do pay pretty handsomely, but it's absolutely heaven for your peace of mind when you're shipping something. Anything to add, Albert?
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add is that if you do find yourself having to ship some artwork, and particularly if it is a work of paper that's in a frame and has glazing like glass, you want to get that switched out for plexiglass. You never want to ship anything that has glass on it through the mail for what seems like an obvious reason, that it's obviously dangerous and can break and ruin the piece. But also, a lot of shipping companies will offer you insurance, or you might buy insurance, like FedEx is the one example I know. But if for some reason you shipped it and it was glass and it was broken and you tried to make a claim, they would not cover that because most of the shippers simply will not insure against glass for the reasons that Kristen listed earlier, because things move on conveyor belts and go pretty fast and get handled very, very roughly. So you always want to assume that someone's going to basically pick up your box and throw it across the room, and can the piece handle that type of situation.
Excellent. So earlier we promised to give you a few resources to use. First is the American Institute for Conservation. They have a very handy Find a Conservator button that will match you up with someone within the state, sometimes within the country that you're in, and the kind of specialty object that they work on. There's the PACIN, Preparation Art Handling Collection Care Information Network, has a lot of resources on their forum, and I think during COVID they've made a lot of videos free for everybody to watch on different aspects of packing, shipping, installation, art handling, and rigging, and things like that. Really super interesting. And then the International Convention of Exhibition and Fine Art Transporters. So this is a professional organization of logistics companies and shippers, and a lot of times, I mean, there are a lot of fine art shippers out there. So you may want to start with a logistics company, and then they might be able to farm out and find different estimates for you from different shippers. But if you need crating and installation and transportation, they can handle all of that for you. So that's a good place to start. So now on to a demonstration. We have Albert and Chelsea made a video the other day, so we'll go on to that.
Hi everybody, I'm Albert Chamillard, the exhibition specialist here at the University of Arizona Museum of Art, and I have Registrar Kristen Schmidt helping me today talk about some different ways to hang works of art at your home. The first thing I want to talk about is several different ways of hangers that can go on the backs of a work of art. Most standard type is wire with screw eyes or several different kinds of hangers, and I want to show you something that when you hang this on your wall, a lot of times you just put one hanger up, and what will happen is it'll start to slip from side to side. If you find the spot that you like and you just put two hangers up, get it on the wire, it'll stay nice and straight for you, so you don't have to worry about interior doors opening and closing and getting it off of center. But I do want to show you a better way to hang works of art, and this style is where you put two D-rings on the back of the frame, evenly spaced down, and in this case, that's 3 inches down from the top. And the benefit to this, as Kristen will put it back up, you'll see a lot of times with wire, a piece will be against the wall and sort of hang out. And when you do the D-rings way method, closes that gap so it's nice and straight up against the wall for you. Okay, so I'm going to take a minute to talk about the proper height for hanging works of art. Here at the museum, we hang everything at 57 inches on center, meaning that the center of the piece is going to be exactly at 57 inches, which is considered a really good height for most people on different heights. At home, you might go a little higher if you're taller. You might even go a little shorter in some cases, but generally you want to keep it around 57 or 58. The first thing is you measure the height of your piece, which in this case is 19 inches. Half of 19 inches is 9.5, and you add that to your center height, which is 57. 57 plus 9.5 would give us a total of 66.5. The next thing we need to do is figure out how low the hangers are on the back. Now, I installed those a little while ago, and I know that they're 3 inches below the top of the frame. I would take the previous numbers, 66.5 inches, and subtract 3, which would give us 63.5 inches. And at that point, we're ready to put our screws into the wall at 63.5 inches, install the piece, and it'll get us a perfect height of 57 inches on center. Hi, I'm going to talk for a minute about the anatomy of a framed work on paper. You can see we have the face of the frame with the glazing, in our case that's plexiglass, a window mat, and then the work of art. You'll see that I removed the dust cover that's usually on the back of framed works. I got rid of our hanging hardware, and what's left is the piece that's held in by pins. Typically, frame shops will use probably 4 or 5 on each side just to hold it nice and tight inside the frame. I removed most of them already just to make this part fast. And when you remove it, I'll show you how I'm going to do. Carefully hold it up, hold with one hand the whole sort of sandwich of backing board and glazing, and remove it from the frame, lay it down. This is our glazing, and glazing is anything that's a transparent cover that goes over the work. So basically glass or acrylic or plexiglass. In our case, we use Conservation Clear, 1/8 inch thick. Very, very good plexiglass to use. And then we come to our mat board. And this is actually a booklet. It's a window mat in front that gives us just the image of the work. And if we open it, you can see the larger piece of paper with some writing and inscribing on it. And this board that it's sitting on is the same mat board as the one for the window mat. It's a 100% cotton board, referred to as a museum board or a rag board sometimes. And they are archival quality, and they will keep this piece protected for the duration of its life. You can see we have paper corners. There's no tapes or anything sticky or non-archival to touch the works. And then there's also a piece that holds these two together. And then on the back is what's called backing board. This is typically foam core is what frame shops will use. Here at the museum, we use Coroplast. Either ones are 100% archival material and perfect for original works of art. And that is the anatomy of a framed work on paper.
So I can go over that math for anybody if they want to repeat of how you hang something 57 inches on center. But I want to talk about a few things. I saw a question come up about 2 hangers versus 1, and yes, 2 hangers is always better than 1. For a lot of reasons. It's 1 hanger will put more stress on the corners of the frame, the joints themselves. There's also the chance that one of the hangers could fail, and so you have a little bit of insurance if you have a second hanger up there. And for the reason that I mentioned in the video, if you're hanging a work of art on an interior wall and it has doors to a bathroom or a bedroom or something, people are going in and out a lot and closing the door, it will send vibrations and cause that piece to shift if you have it on 1 hanger. And if you have it just on 2 hangers, prevents it from doing that. Sometimes it's a little bit tough. You have to hang 2 hangers just slightly lower than 1 hanger because it will rise a little bit by having it on 2 points. I also want to mention different types of glazing and a lot of like frame shops and things like that will advertise UV protection in glass or plexiglass. And your typical frame shop will have 3 different types. They have a very low-end, low-cost version. It's green glass, basically. And that has about 45% UV protection is what they advertise. The next one would be a Conservation Clear. That has a much higher UV protection rate. And it has a lot better quality than green glass will. Green glass is basically what you have in your windows at your home, that sort of thing. The third type is museum glass, which is very expensive and is not actually used by museums since we don't use glass. But it's a popular option in a lot of frame shops because it does offer fantastic quality. The issue is that museum glass does not offer any more UV protection than conservation glass will. So I think conservation clear glass is a good option just all around if you're using glass and you want it in your home. One thing to keep in mind is that one of the largest glass manufacturers in the United States is TrueView, and that's where we get all of our plexi from, and that's where most frame shops will get their glass from. When they're doing these UV rates, they are not accounting for Arizona sun. The company is actually based in North Carolina, and I assume they're getting these rates based on light, sunlight from North Carolina or maybe the Northeast. But there is no real protection if you have a work of art in direct sunlight, whether it's got glass or UV glass or museum glass or any of those things. So it's critical to limit the amount of direct sunlight and don't have it at all if possible. Trying to think of what else was on there. Should I go over one more time how we do hang something at 57 inches on center? That's good for a museum height, but it's not necessarily a height that's perfect for home. You'll kind of figure out if you use that as a standard, should I go a little bit higher or a little bit lower? An easier way to think about 57 inches on center is if you have a framed work of art that's 20 inches tall, you'll take that number, 20 inches, and divide it in half, so you have 10 inches, and add that to 57. That means the top of the piece, the top of the frame or the top of the canvas is going to be at 67 inches. So that's an easy way to kind of have somebody hold up a tape measure, hold the piece there, and see if that's a good placement. You might want it a little higher. Rarely do I see it hung lower, but occasionally you'll have people who go a little bit shorter than that. The tricky part of all that equation, once you have that 67 inches, is how to know exactly where to account for the hanging system on the back and get those hangers on the wall. It's pretty easy. If you go to the back of a frame and you put your thumb at the top of the frame and grab the wire and pull it, you should be able to measure, and it's probably going to be anywhere from 3 to 5 inches. And it's easy to test. You can experiment and end up with a lot of holes in the wall, but it's okay if you start a little bit lower. You might be able to hide those if you're raising and going a little bit higher. Does anybody have any questions for us about any of this? Any of the?
We had another question from Facebook, actually. I thought was a really great question. Is are these tips also applicable to like non-original, not famous artists? Would you suggest these tips for any work of art that someone had in their home?
Oh yes,
Absolutely.
Everything you hang. Yeah, I mean, you should basically, the best practice is if you have a $3 poster, to treat it as just as well with all the things we're saying as you would an expensive work of art.
I mean, if you love it, you want it to last, and these are the tips that will help that happen.
Kind of why I put the children's art question at the beginning, right? Even that has value, maybe not monetary yet, but it's valuable to you. Great. Well, other people, if you have other questions, please, if you're watching on Facebook, go ahead and add them to the comments section there, or you can add them to the chat here. We still have plenty of time for some questions. One question that I'm sure that each of you get, so I'll maybe offer it to both of you with some different experience that you've each had in your career. What's the most challenging experience that you've had with a work of art?
You want to go first, Kristen?
Okay. So I have a lot of stories. But the one that sort of inspires the most horror in myself is, many of you who've been to the museum are familiar with our Audrey Flack Marilyn Vanitas painting that is hung on the stairwell almost all the time. It's still there right now. And that was not at the museum when I started. It was on tour with an exhibition. And when it came back, I was like, great, we're welcoming home a painting. And it turned out that it had been crated. It had been taken out of the museum and crated outside of the museum. So on a monsoon day, here's this truck backing up into the loading dock and saying, here's your crate, please take your crate. And we're like, great, here's our crate. And it didn't fit through any opening in the building. So, it's starting to rain. Luckily, we have fantastic neighbors at the university. And so the theater department allowed us to bring the large crate in to their workshop, and we unloaded there, wrapped the painting in plastic, and carried it in person over to the museum. This story is going to be pretty long. And then we had to get it into the stairwell, but we could not, it doesn't fit going up the stairs. So we had to bring it up through the freight elevator and carry it down the stairs, face down. But because of the way the stairway is, most of the weight had to be carried on one side of the painting, and then we had to hoist it really high in the air. So that was a nightmare. A great learning experience, I should say, great opportunity. But yeah, what I learned from that was we're never lending that painting to anybody ever again unless we can get 4 7 feet tall people to take it down for us.
Yeah, I like Kristen, I have so many stories that it's hard to know where to start, but I'd say in general, sculptures tend to be difficult, especially heavy sculptures that are small tend to be the worst, because you need several people to have a good grip and to move it, but a lot of times there just isn't the space or the ability to do it. Suspending things from ceilings is always a challenge for all kinds of reasons. You generally have to make some holes in the ceiling. You have to find something that's strong enough to suspend a work of art. And actually one that stands out for me was one of the first times I was helping out at the museum. I was helping Nathan Saxton, who I think is here. I guess I see him down there. We had to deinstall a Kiki Smith sculpture that was suspended from the ceiling. And it was, I think, if I remember correctly, it was like the size of a small car. And it wasn't too bad to do that. The issue was that the crate it went into was kind of a crate within a crate. So you had to get it on its platform and then put that into the crate. And we could tell as we did it that it was reverse engineered, that somebody probably started by just building the crate around the work. And then, theoretically, this is how you get it in and out, but it was extremely challenging time to, Nathan says, still have nightmares about that one. Yeah, that was a rough one.
Thank you guys for answering that. Another question I think is really helpful, because I know we have some practicing artists that are here today, and maybe even some students, is you go into, your average art supply shop, frame shop, and you see presented acid-free paper, acid-free mat board. What is the, why buy acid-free paper? Why pay a little bit of extra money if you're an artist creating work, even if you're a student up and coming?
Do you want me to answer that, Kristen? The easy answer is don't buy it if it's acid-free, because really what that is what they'll call alpha cellulose, which is just plant material. And like a tree basically that's been bleached. What you want to use if you want to protect work is cotton, 100% cotton board. That's what you want to look for. If you think of papers like Arches, their papers are 100% cotton. If you keep that or store that on a cotton board, that's going to do the trick. The acid-free stuff will generally be competitively priced, a little bit less expensive than a cotton board, but I would avoid it because there isn't a lot of difference between an acid-free board and a non-acid-free board.
And what happens to acidic materials is they will turn brown. Basically, you'll see the mat turning brown. It'll turn the paper brown. It'll mutilate the colors that you've got. So you want to try and preserve that.
Excellent. Good tip that I wish that someone had told me when I was in art school, honestly, pulling out pieces from my closet that have not stood the test of time. And with that, I know a lot of emerging artists, students have to frame work themselves, just, because the cost is prohibitive to have a professional framer. So when you're doing that, what are some, I know you kind of showed this a little bit, Albert, in the video, but maybe you could talk a little bit about the fact that you mentioned nothing sticky or tacky, but why not just use, what kind of tape is available to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. You really, in handling works of art, especially works of art on paper, where you would have a window mat and have some need to hold it in place, you don't want to use anything, any sort of adhesive, any sort of sticky material that's going to attach to the piece. If you think of photo corners from old photo albums where they'd have those little black corners, they still make those. They make clear ones that are made for this purpose. And what it is you kind of lay your piece down and you kind of hold it in place, and you put one each on each corner. And the back will be self-adhesive, but you can always remove that work of art, and there's never going to be any residue from tape or anything like that. I do want to add one tip about using corners like that. Because of humidity can make paper expand or contract, you should really only use 3 corners, not 4. So you'd have 2 on the bottom and then 1 on the upper left or right. And what that will do is that when that paper does expand in different humidity levels or temperatures, it'll prevent it from wrinkling, which you can sometimes see in framed works where a paper print will start to wrinkle. If you keep it to 3 corners, that will not happen, might not happen as bad.
And I think we had a question that's kind of touches upon this idea of like framing work in a special way. Can you explain how you frame a floating work on paper?
Yes, and that's floated works are very, very popular, and unfortunately there is no way to do that without using some sort of adhesive on the back. And if you're working with a good frame shop, they will go over with you the details of how they do that, and you should ask for sure, like, what type of tapes are you going to be using? Are you using like a linen tape, which is a really common tape in frame shops, but unfortunately the adhesive on the back is similar to the adhesive that used to be on the back of stamps when you had to lick stamps and put them down, and it will leave a heavy, heavy residue on that. The other critical part of floated works of paper, is that there is spacers used between the front of the artwork itself and the glass. You never want to have the glass pressed up against the work of art. You want to use, frame shops will use these little plastic squares basically to keep it from doing that, but that's critical in doing floated works.
Great. Well, we have a couple of minutes left, so if folks have last minute questions that they're really hoping to get answered, please go ahead and put them in the chat. While we're waiting for folks to think of or type those questions, Kristen, Albert, are there any last minute tips that you maybe wish that you could impart upon up and coming collectors or artists that are creating work and storing it or shipping it?
Yeah, and this is not a hint, but if you happen to be collecting artwork and you think that you might wish to donate it somewhere to a nonprofit art displaying institution of your choice, that it's great to start early in collecting the documentation that is associated with that artwork. So, you know, your bill of sale when you purchased it, if there was a catalog that it was in a show, like all of those things help establish the provenance of the piece and help establish the value, and just really help you know, a museum with their own record keeping, and they'd be much more likely to accept it as a gift, much more excited to, because all the work will have already been done. So that's, yeah, that's really important.
Yeah, that's a great one to save all ephemera, anything you have involved with purchasing or anything involved with the work of art. Something that came to mind for me was if you're starting out as an artist and especially working on paper, and you do have to frame things, that's generally required. You can learn most of basic framing from online videos on YouTube, and you can find a lot of the same supplies that are used in museums or in any frame shop online. It's easy to find. The toughest thing you'll have is how to cut window mats. And they do offer a lot of options, handheld cutters, things like that. They're generally not worth the money. If you really want to invest in a mat cutter, there's some pretty good models that start at around $500, but that's a lot of money for artists starting out. The easier option is to start a friendly relationship with a local frame shop and go in and talk to them and talk about maybe just buying window mats occasionally as you need them. It's a very cost-effective way, and they will help you do that. All the other parts of framing that we talked about, frames themselves, glazing, can all be found for competitive prices online.
Well, I don't think that we have any more questions coming through, unless Kristen, Albert, you have any last tips. I'll just say that Kristen did have a great slide of some resources of some great associated professional organizations that we will make sure that we maybe post on Facebook. We have this event live, and we can add that to the comments maybe later today. And this event as well, we'll be posting on YouTube probably later next week. So if there's anything that you want to come back to, especially the how to frame and the math involved, and watch over again a couple times, which I know I do repeatedly, ask Albert and Kristen, what's that math again? That'll be a nice handy tutorial that'll be up on YouTube.
We never get it wrong either.
Just about every time we do it, we get it wrong at least once. It's usually the very last one after you've had success about 30 times in a row. Yeah, I wanted to add too, please feel free to email if you have any questions or if you want to know any more details about this.
Fantastic. Thank you everyone for being here. It was great to see some familiar faces, great to see some new ones. And Kristen, Albert, thank you for sharing your time and some fantastic advice with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Take care.